So I thought I would sit down today and give my response to a recent news segment published by a Mr. Phil Williams. Now, unlike Mr. Williams, I have better things to do. So, this news segment was published about 2 weeks ago, I believe, and I'm just going to be sitting down, listening through it, and I will be stopping to give all of you my thoughts in a very unscripted and a straightforward approach to the various myriad of slander, libel, and malicious allegations made in this segment, and you'll hear it all straight from me. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
Tonight at 6, News Channel 5 investigates the neo-Nazis next door, a large hate group that our investigation discovered is expanding its presence right here in Tennessee. Good evening to you. I'm Carrie Sharp. That group, the so-called Patriot Front, is probably best known for plastering our communities with their hate-filled posters and graffiti.
I would say objectively, we're definitely best known for the marches, which is the only activism of ours they featured in the segment, but let's keep going.
Now our investigation has uncovered new videos that reveal the group is also preparing for battle.
They didn't uncover these videos in an investigation, we published them.
Chief Investigative Reporter Phil Williams is continuing his Hate Comes to Main Street investigation. Phil, you have been working on this story for more than 3 months.
That's right, and during that time, we gathered never-before-seen video that shows what the Patriot Front is really up to. As you're
Also a lie. The video he features is a video that we published, and it's not never before seen because we published it.
You're about to see, that includes training men to fight right here in the volunteer state.
This is an allegation we hear a lot of times throughout this video. We're, training men to fight, and we'll get into it a little bit more. But martial arts is not evidence of criminal intent.
Right now, they got an enemy. If they get rid of their enemies, they're gonna have to find a new one.
Our investigation began last fall as anti-fascist activists protested an annual white supremacist gathering inside the lodge at Montgomery Bell State Park, about 40 miles west of Nashville.
Of course, the anarchists, with extremely violent rhetoric protesting the American Renaissance Conference, do not get any of the same treatment that Patriot Front does in this segment because Phil Williams is ideologically more aligned with them.
It was an investigation that would eventually lead us across the state to this large compound being built by a hate group right here in Tennessee. A compound where members train for battles that sometimes play out on the streets of America.
That is a ridiculous sentence. So first of all, not a compound. This is a regular piece of land in a rural part of the country, and it has a barn-type building with a private gym on it, and it has a house. This is not a compound. There is no encircling wall, there's no guard towers, there's no spotlights, there's no barbed wire. This isn't they want you to imagine this sort of Aryan nations, fantasy, militia, Waco from the 80s sort of nonsense when they're ascribing all of this to us, but none of it is true. What he's describing is essentially private property that some people live at, not owned by me or the organization, just people's houses, and they decide to train jiu-jitsu there and other martial arts combat sports, which are ultimately sports and practical disciplines. And he says this is a intent to engage in battle that sometimes play out on the streets of America. Well, he doesn't cite a single example because it hasn't. And the core idea that if I am intending to engage in battles on the streets of America, and I have been organizing with hundreds of men for almost a decade, and not one of these battles has taken place, either I am so inept at creating these public battlefield locations in incidents, or it's a falsehood. And he's just relying on this sort of news anchor veneer of official credibility to sell you these lies. Let's keep going.
These are smart, observant, thoughtful Americans who see that our country is going in the wrong direction and has been going in the wrong direction for decades.
Taylor's right
Which
on
may
that.
be why Jerry Taylor, the founder of the American Renaissance Conference, insisted that we not take video of any faces while we were inside the conference.
He insisted that you not take video of any faces, Mr. Williams, because evidently you have a very bad track record of protecting people's personal information, or falsely ascribing people to some sort of political ideology you happen to disagree with and then slandering them. We'll get into that more later.
How about the neo-Nazis?
I don't even know a neo-Nazi.
That is Absolutely false. Jared Taylor lied to you.
Jeff Tischhauser tracks hate for the Southern Poverty Law Center, and he knows a lot about the men we identified from outside the conference using facial recognition software. Men like Thomas Rousseau.
So they say they needed facial recognition software, and they have this amazing little CSI type graphic going on the news segment here, where they're flashing between a bunch of different. This is not what a facial recognition software user interface looks like, and it's me, and I think I'm something well known to people who are researching Patriot Front. If you search up the organization, I'm one of the faces you'll see. I'm wearing the same clothes that I do in a lot of videos. He did not need facial recognition software to determine that that was me when I'm wearing my hat. This is a ridiculous thing, and he's just throwing these words around, and they made these silly little graphics for TV to try to trick people who don't know any better, who are watching this segment into thinking that you're some type of detective.
Nationalism is natural. Patriotism is inevitable.
Rousseau, seen here during a demonstration in Nashville last summer, heads the
Very
Patriot Front, one of the largest organized hate groups in the country. Known for their flash mob protests that suddenly spring out of the backs of rental trucks, members wear white gaiters to hide their faces. Their flag-waving marches are designed to present an image that also hides the hate behind their cause.
When you get...
It's not meant to hide anything. We say what we believe. We show what we want to show. There's no secret message. More on that later.
Within their private spaces online, members of Patriot Front worship Hitler. Right.
That's abjectly false.
They deny the Holocaust. They use
which is a valid historical opinion to have. Free speech applies.
Tremendous amount of racial slurs between each other.
They're very clever.
Some people use profanity. When he's speaking about, when you get inside their chats, he's speaking about a very limited window of partial availability of certain chats, which was the result of a malicious and illegal hack from 2021. So this guy does not have recent information, he does not have full information, and he, more importantly, does not have accurate information. He's making these wild allegations based on very piecemeal evidence extrapolated to his personal extreme. Right? This is not somebody who's trying to tell you the truth, and is not somebody who's actually trying to give you a picture of what we believe. The best way to find out what the organization believes is to look at what we say. I have no interest in being a liar. I have no interest in changing or couching my opinions. If I wanted public appeal, I wouldn't say a lot of the things that I do. And if I wanted to radicalize my message for attention, well, that would be pointless because we get plenty of attention already. Let's keep going.
Sounds in patriotism. Patriot Front.
So that's a way for Patriot Front to appeal to the larger conservative movement.
Again, if I was really trying to appeal to conservatives at the expense of my own integrity, you think I might do something like endorse Donald Trump, or we would have people speak highly of Trump, or go to Trump rallies, or we would call ourselves conservatives, which we don't. Any of these things would be incredibly easy for us to do in order to try to get a bunch of conservatives on our side of things, but we don't do any of that. So we're really trying to get after conservatives by adopting Americana, but we're not going to try to say anything positive about Trump. The motive does not make any sense. In truth, the American history and American heritage, the symbols and truth of the culture of Americana is actually very congruent with nationalism. America's history is full of the opinions and thoughts and legislation about race and nationality and immigration and politics and democracy and a republic and all of these things that align perfectly with what we believe. And so little of it, so precious little and so recent, aligns with the opinions of these men who are fundamentally seeking to transform America into something more and more continuously unrecognizable, not only to the founding fathers, but even generations more recently. So really, our use of American heritage and culture is actually just a truthful representation of what we believe and who we are loyal to and what we are fighting for. But they want you to believe that it's fake. The actual message that we convey, they want you to believe that we're lying about all of this because the actual message they want us to adopt is one of antisocial radicality for radicality's sake. They want to put us in that box so we are more easily dismissed. But that's not who we are and that's not what we are. And we have no interest in lying to our audience, unlike Williams and Tischauer here.
We are Americans. We are not white Americans because there are no other kind of Americans than those who are white and from Europe.
True, again, if I was trying to moderate myself for public appeal, you don't think I would say things like this. But why do I say them? Because I believe them. Moving on.
At age 26, Thomas Rousseau is polished in his racism.
Polished racism.
Liberty, victory!
But leaked videos from inside Patriot Front.
Again, this is a 4 or 5-year-old leaked video. These individuals sent this to me and said, hey, can we use this? And I said, no, that's ridiculous. End of conversation. One guy making a stupid joke 5 years ago, that's your big gotcha to prove that our message is false. That's all they have. Moving on.
Revealed that beneath that polished veneer,
Good take right there. See high, let's go.
One silly joke 5 years ago.
Nazis.
These are hardened white supremacists who want to see a white ethno-state created somewhere in the United States.
Another really strange line of rhetoric from this guy. We do not promote or practice a secessionist, balkanistic mindset. We do not speak of that as a strategy or a tactic that we employ. We are not trying to get the South to secede for a new Confederate States of America. We are not trying to do any of that, and there's no evidence of that. So why does he bring it up? There's no statements he can attribute to us wanting to take a part of the country and make it into a white ethno-state. What we actually want to do is influence Americans, our countrymen, within the continent to influence their own economic standing, their social standing, their political standing, and their health and viability, social mobility. We want to build up our people and accrue power towards the nationalistic and patriotic individuals within our organized collectives to be able to change the country. It's really simple. We want to accrue power and influence through organizing, through political organizing, that's what everybody does, believe it or not, and use that power and influence to change the country for the better. He wants you to believe that we're trying to get some sort of secessionist white ethno-state global race war nonsense because, again, they keep trying to put us into this sort of box, which is ultimately something which is outlined by the SPLC or these other matters in the 70s and 80s. They want to have you imagine the organization as something which is fundamentally anachronistic. But at every point, they fail to actually describe how their allegations, how their slander connects with the real, provable publications of the organization, which they so rarely actually reference in this expose about us. Again, when they're trying to prove that we're lying about what we believe, they reference a single joke made in passing half a decade ago. That's what they have. Let's keep going.
You are not welcome here!
Outside the American Renaissance Conference, we had also spotted these two men. Our search quickly came back with matches of Texas and
again with the ridiculous graphic trying to prove that they use these individuals have been doxxed. We will be blurring their faces on the screen. They're trying to trick you into thinking that they're actual investigators when all that this is they probably could have gotten all this information and all these allegations on scrolling Twitter for an hour in comments that don't like us, and they just put it in. Again, this whole thing, Phil Williams, he puts on this veneer of a news anchor so that average sort of everyday people will watch this and assume that it is false, because why would your local news anchor lie to you? But in actuality, this is a heavily politically biased, very much cherry-picked, obfuscated piece of malicious slander, very much intended to stifle people that he feels are politically opposed to him.
Illinois. Both were among 31 Patriot Front members arrested 3 years ago, accused of plotting to create a riot at an Idaho Pride celebration. Ryan Hunter was one of the prosecutors.
They wanted to basically promote a fight. They wanted to get people to respond, make them angry, make them attack them, and, their history.
Mr. Hunter, it's amazing that he says this because Patriot Front has protested well over a dozen of these such events, and we will protest more in the future. And not one of them has included any violence or any actual display of this tactic that he claims. And by the way, we've protested such events before and after the events in Idaho. And if that was really my intent, to incite a fight, then why has it never happened? In all of these other successful instances where we're not arrested. And by the way, that I never got to argue my case at a trial because the judge dismissed my case due to Mr. Hunter's prosecutorial misconduct, hiding evidence. He won't tell you that. He won't tell you that the judge listed his egregious and unprofessional conduct in my case, trying to hide evidence that proved my innocence. He did all of this until the judge, who was quite probably amenable to him at the beginning, had had enough. My case was dismissed because he attempted to hide evidence that proved our peaceful intentions.
You've been announced. Announce. Announce.
Hey man, sheriff's office, everyone have their hands visible.
This never-before-seen police video shows what happened when Coeur d'Alene, Idaho police intercepted 2 Patriot Front U-Hauls on their way to that Pride event. In the video, we see the men from that balcony as they're being processed by police.
And it does detail our peaceful intentions.
While Thomas Rousseau insisted their intentions were peaceful, police discovered what a witness called a small army prepared for war.
That's not evidence. Some random bystander used the word little army, and that's enough to put people in prison. That's not legal evidence.
Including being equipped with riot shields.
They're just shields.
Shields that this leaked video shows Patriot Front prepares for use in battle.
Again, prepares for use in battle, right? The point of that training is to inspire confidence in case somebody does attack you, and also it's a team building exercise. They're not shields meant for a riot. The purpose of having a shield, actually, is largely to defend against a thrown projectile, or if somebody maliciously attacks you unprovoked, as the only way they could do so against the organization, you can defend against that person and keep your own body safe from grievous injury without actually needing to touch that person or retaliate in any way. If we had the intention of engaging in combat where we would injure and hurt the other person, why would we want to put a wall between us and that person? What would the point be? Why not just bring people with bats, clubs, brass knuckles? Why would we do any of that? Why not have knives or guns? But not only are all of those things absent, they are absent in accordance to very well-known and established rules of the organization. Mr. Williams has something of a conundrum here, because he knows that it's very public knowledge that all of our actions exclude weapons of any kind, even at such actions where it would be totally lawful and even normal for us to have tools, even up to including firearms. At the Coeur d'Alene protest, which we were attempting to attend the protest, the lawful First Amendment protected protest, there were men walking around with plate carrier, body armor, and fully loaded rifles, probably with a round in the chamber. I'm not saying that because I'm offended by it or I'm clutching my pearls about it. It's totally lawful. It's your right as an American to do so, right? But if that is legal, then how is having a piece of sheet metal or polycarbonate meant to prevent somebody from throwing or striking you? How is that less legal than having a piece of steel on your chest meant to stop a rifle round? Explain that, Mr. Hunter. You can't. He never has.
Those shields can be used offensively, and in fact...
They can. So can everything. Your hands could be used offensively. Will you make everybody wear arm casts to your protests, right? A car could be used offensively. Will you ban driving in the state of Idaho, Mr. Hunter? No, you won't. That is not a legal argument. In order for something to be illegal, you actually have to commit a crime with it.
In riot training, they are. They're intended to push and to move people out of the way or to certain areas.
That's his own assessment. Maybe in police riot training, but unlike what many people claim, we're actually not police.
And we actually got testimony on cross-examination that confirmed that, yes, that's how they had been trained to use those.
And when police unmasked the Patriot
He's misinterpreting that, and it's partial.
Front members, they found their caps secured to their heads by chin straps, and the caps were no ordinary headgear.
Any of these things are ridiculous. What they tried to do in this whole case was take 10 different fully legal things, fully legal practices, and string them together into a thread of illegality which said all of these men deserve to go to jail. But ultimately, doing legal things in a certain order or configuration, such as we did, does not mean that you deserve to go to jail. And there's a piece of plastic that people put inside their hats, which gives the hat structure and a degree of protection in case anything hits you on the head, in case somebody throws something at you. But the idea that this is proof that you're there to attack people, proof that you're there to deprive people of their rights is, again, ridiculous. You don't look at a turtle in a shell and presume that it's a predator. You presume that it has that shell for its own protection, not because it seeks to attack others. And if you look at everything they're talking about, they're all purely defensive implements. And you might ask, why do you need all this thing? Why do you need all this thing? There have been quite a number of very well-documented cases of Antifa in the country, anarchists, rabid political deviants, attacking people unprovoked with weapons. Even more so, there were Antifa armed and describing how they might want to attack people or defend this location against attacks, which means justifying in preemption their unprovoked attacks at this location. So the idea that I had no reason to consider how our members might want to feel safe from bodily injury in a very volatile political climate in America, that's ridiculous. And saying that people deserve to go to jail because of that is absolutely malicious.
Inside, they found hardened plastic designed to protect their heads in battle. They also discovered
He keeps using the word battle. It's ridiculous. The choice in word is just ridiculous. Let's move on.
tactical radios for communicating over long distances, first aid kits to treat the injured.
A radio for communicating over a long distance. Yes, Mr. Williams, that's what radios do. It's nothing. It's radios so you can talk to people, right? Yeah, a first aid kit. How can a first aid kit be used defensively? What, are we going to bandage people up, make them mummies? Maybe don't cut that out. Everything in here indicates a group of people that has a belief that it's possible that they might be attacked by such people as we knew to be present at this event. I understand that peaceful conduct is incredibly important in public assemblies in America. And you know how I understand it? Because I do it, because I practice it, and I'm rigorously disciplined in making sure our actions are safe and orderly. You can lie and say whatever you want about that, but actually looking at the Patriot Front's track record of countless demonstrations, countless thousands of instances of activism across the country, there is no violence to report on. There is no example of the types of battle. You keep using the word battle. There's no example of this because it doesn't happen. And he keeps telling you these odd things. The evidence he has to go for is not pointing to a battle. The evidence he goes for is pointing to a radio and saying that's our intent to battle.
You don't come to a boxing match with gloves on and dressed to fight if you don't intend to fight. And that
But it wasn't a boxing match, Mr. Hunter. This is public assembly. And public assembly follows very different rules. These men did not have hand wraps or boxing gloves or clubs or brass knuckles or anything that you could ever actually associate with being an offensive implement. What these men did have is items which signaled that they were worried about being attacked for their exercise of free speech. And nothing else. And you had evidence which proved that we were there to be peaceful and orderly and be mindful and respectful to the existing permits, which we were fully willing to avoid any such disruption of in our practice of our First Amendment rights. And you suppressed that evidence and you continue to lie about it today. And that's why the judge dismissed the case.
And that was the circumstance we faced with this group is they were ready to fight. They were prepared to fight. They had trained to fight.
And the groups.
Again, there were people there in full vision of the police with fully loaded rifles and plate carriers and other tactical gear. I think even a few of them might have had helmets on, ballistic rated helmets. They were completely untouched, unbothered, walking around freely. I'm not saying that because I think they should have been arrested. Again, they practiced their First Amendment rights and their Second Amendment rights perfectly within the boundaries of the law. But only when you do that with a certain collection of political motivations, now it's suddenly deserving of you being thrown in prison, according to Mr. Hunter. All of these arguments apply way more accurately, these false libelous arguments apply far more accurately and acutely to the people there with firearms, right? If you don't show up somewhere with a firearm unless you're planning on killing people, right? That's his argument. But of course it's false, and it doesn't hold up in a court of law.
The ops plan indicated the Patriot Front Army would line up on the outskirts of the
He used the word army again. Not true.
Park and proceed inwards until barriers to approach were met. There they planned to create what they called a confrontational dynamic.
So this is my document. I wrote this, and I wrote it to myself. It is my own personal note sheet for the event. And here's what I mean, and I can tell you what I mean because I wrote it. We wanted to assemble on the outskirts of the park. True. And we wanted to approach until there was a barrier, right? What would that barrier be, perhaps? Well, I would know, and I actually filmed this in the exculpatory evidence that Mr. Hunter resigned to obscurity. That barrier could have been tents or evidence of a police line or some sort of fencing, or it could have been simply the police asking us, hey, can you stay there? Or it could have been just a reasonable distance from a crowd of people, right? Why does it sound so vague? Because I didn't know exactly what the event was going to look like the day of. I didn't write this after already having seen the event that we planned on protesting the morning it happened. And when it says confrontational dynamic, the reason I wrote that actually has a fully contextual explanation. Very recently, other groups that claimed to want to protest this event in the Pride in the Park event, they wanted to protest it, but then they relocated, after police pressure, they relocated their protests across town, which is a violation of their First Amendment right. You have a right to protest something where it is. So I wanted to be clear that I do not want to protest something on the other side of town. I feel like that is kowtowing to legal pressures, which I find to be unconstitutional. So I wanted to protest something within eye and earshot of that thing, as is my right, as is the right of any American. And that's why I wanted the dynamic to be the confrontation of two ideas. If I had this meticulous plan to engage in violence and fight, why is my plan for getting out of town so simple? If we had the plan to rush in and engage and fight and battle, as you said, battle, we're gonna battle, right? That's the plan that we're going to go in there and battle. Why does the rest of the plan then just talk about us walking down the street and getting picked up? I think I would have had a better plan for getting out of a city had we had just battled in, provided the entire police department was there.
And during the testimony that we were able to elicit from them on cross-examination, they confirmed that people really they didn't consider those to be barriers that they would stop for.
So you're saying
this is, again, what prosecutors do in cross-examination is they try to ask solely leading questions, solely questions that can be misinterpreted and the words that can be twisted around. And he doesn't actually quote these statements, mind you, because, again, they probably don't actually support what he's saying. But I was in charge of the action. I would have told people when to stop, and that was my opinion. And these people wouldn't have gone out on their own to do anything that I didn't tell them to do.
you're saying if they encountered people at the Pride Fest, they were just going to plow through them?
That was effectively what they said at trial.
Which brings
incorrect
us back to Montgomery Bell State Park and another man we identified from the balcony.
So is a longtime member of...
You love the computer sound graphics they play?
Patriot Front. Within Patriot Front, he's one of their lead recruiters.
We discovered is one of the people behind this 122-acre Patriot Front compound in...
Something that they've actually done here, which is really egregious and dishonest, and you'll notice they took this video down after it had received 100,000 views on YouTube. They took it down because what they've actually done here, and we'll be obscuring some of this video for that purpose, what they've done is actually filmed, I believe via helicopter, people who have people's homes, people's private residences, who have no association with the organization, who I have never met, who I have never spoken to, who no member of Patriot Front has ever met, perhaps, I don't know. But they have no association with the organization, and they have nothing to do with any of this. But Mr. Williams, in his infinite wisdom, and the reason, again, you talked about why Jared Taylor might not have wanted Mr. Williams to go into the conference and film everybody's faces. Well, here's why. Because he might have gotten some random person and claimed they were a terrorist. Because what he has done here is filmed regular people's regular residences. But because he has this deeply malicious bias within his own mind, he is looking at a normal person's piece of rural property and calling it a paramilitary compound meant for training people for battle to kill people. That's what he's doing, looking at regular people's houses. And they took this video down because they recognized just how far they had gone. I don't think they'll be issuing any apologies.
Tennessee, located between... When we flew over in Sky 5, it appeared to be very much still under construction.
It appears that they're using this place to network and...
Again, you don't even know whose property is whose here.
Strategize. They're inviting, white supremacists.
He says we're using this place to network and strategize. Again, this is all with a thread of them trying to create an image in your mind of an extremely conniving and secret and malicious sort of deal located on a plot of land, which we've already discussed to be very ambiguous as to whether or not they know who actually lives where. But the idea of networking and strategizing, if I need to network and strategize, I can just set up a meeting. You know, this isn't the 19th century where we have to travel across the country to meet in a room to network and strategize. We can have social events and events where people train and compete in martial arts, which do not have any of the ridiculous negative connotations that he's trying to allege here.
Photo obtained by News Channel 5 Investigates shows with Rousseau at that East Tennessee compound, hosting another white supremacist.
Again, it's not a compound. It's a barn with a gym in it. It's very nice. Not a compound, though.
Supremacist group from Texas.
3, 2, 1, fight!
And this video posted online shows Elliott in a studio adored with neo-Nazi symbolism, training men for
Again, I don't really believe that Mr. Williams is an accurate assessor of what does and does not count as neo-Nazi symbolism, so we can skip over that.
bare-knuckled battle that often leaves these Patriot Front warriors bruised.
Again, battle. Warriors. I'll take warriors. But, you know, the idea that this is about... No, these are boxing matches. These are boxing matches. Bare-knuckle boxing, jiu-jitsu, grappling, wrestling, Muay Thai, right? These are sports. These are sports. These are practical and physical disciplines. Again, if we were doing all of this boxing training, all of these jiu-jitsu competitions, all of these things in order to train people to go out and fight pedestrians, just random people at our marches, why has it never happened? Why have you never seen any Patriot Front member rush up on somebody out on the sidewalk and do a rear naked choke? It doesn't happen. Again, the allegation is totally at odds with the reality.
And bloodied.
Patriot Front will claim that
sometimes
they are non-violent,
in boxing you'll get hit.
But they're training in mixed martial arts. They're using their...
How many martial arts gyms are there in the country? How many of them would you assume are evidence of criminal intent? Probably none of them. It is not evidence of malicious, violent criminal intent. It really is not. If he really wanted to investigate a violent and malicious culture, which actually results in many deaths, sometimes hundreds of deaths a year in Tennessee, he should have gone west instead of east and visited Memphis. I, for one, would love to see Mr. Williams walking the streets of Memphis and trying to uncover all the violence that takes place there.
Training in mixed martial arts to escalate confrontations and to hurt people.
Which is...
Again, the idea is that it's to escalate confrontations to hurt people. They have one example, which they're about to get into, one example in almost a decade of organizing, constant public assemblies, and they have one example in almost a decade. They claim this is our big MO, but they have one example, and let's get into it.
Exactly what happened to a musician who tried to confront the group in Boston in 2022. A federal judge recently awarded the victim $2.7 million in damages, although it's not clear he'll ever collect. Police video shows that when a Patriot Front U-Haul was stopped...
You'll notice that whenever the news is talking about this incident in Boston, they only ever show a few of the same images. They only ever show a microsecond snapshot of what happened. Now, they know there's video of it. They know there's video of the whole thing. Why do they never show it to you? They'll fly a helicopter over somebody's house, some random person's house, to try to prove to you that he's a racist, but they won't show you a video of an altercation. They're ascribing all of this importance. Why won't they do that? Why aren't they showing you what actually happened? Because this man was an aggressor. This man crossed the street, walked out of his way, and attempted to engage in some sort of confrontation of a violent and physical nature with members of the organization. And when he attempted to do that, he was simply set aside without being injured or hurt in any malicious way. And then he attempted to re-enter the crowd of peaceful demonstrators several times. And during all of his thrashing and attempts to assault these men, he hurt his hand while hitting the shields. And that is your evidence. And again, of course, the greater notion is that we marched all the way through Boston, maybe 3 or 4 miles through Boston, passing thousands of people, only to single out one random black guy who had to walk way out of his way to actually come and see us. That was the plan. That was one. Again, if my motive is to attack random people, what, do I have a clicker counter where I wait until we hit 1,200 in a city before we pick one? That's ridiculous. Again, The allegation is totally fraudulent when you compare it to the actual evidence of how peaceful these things are.
Shortly after that incident, one of the people present was... He's the one on the right at the American Renaissance Conference back in the fall.
And this isn't your, granddad's KKK. This isn't
Correct.
The old school white supremacists.
Correct.
These guys are smart. I'll
Correct.
give them that little bit of credit, is they're smart in how they approach it.
We are. And again, thank you, Mr. Hunter. So we're really smart and sophisticated with how we go about things. And also our intent is to go out and hurt people. Why have we never gone out and hurt people? If we're so smart and we have this motive, why has it never happened? That's the question. But of course, when you need to straighten that truth out, it's that the motive is actually not to go out and hurt people. But we are smart.
Ryan Hunter says he believes it's critical that Americans see beyond the images that Patriot Front would like to project.
Yeah, they should read our content too.
To see that what they represent is neither good nor American.
And it's,
There's no actual argument ever made by these people to try to describe how this isn't American, how our beliefs are not in line with the facts of American history.
Incumbent upon all of us that see it for what it is to combat it every chance that we get and tell what really this group is about and what their message is all about. And so that's probably my biggest takeaway from this.
Big words about showing what things are really about from a man who hid evidence illegally.
And in addition to their marches...
I interviewed a prosecutor who has taken on Patriot Front.
And
Did
lost.
that person have any tips for law?
So the segment ends with a bunch of other accusations, and essentially Mr. Williams is telling people to call the police on anybody you see exercising certain forms of free assembly or free speech that Patriot Front is seen to be doing. But in summary, what's important to realize is that this video was a collection of some of the most commonly made slanderous labels used against the organization. Namely that we are criminal, that we are violent, that we're trying to go out there and hurt people, and that everything that we're doing, our actual beliefs, our Americana, our actual affections for the country that we happen to live in and have ancestors who resided with and fought for, that is all false. This is a collection of all of the arguments that you'll see from this section of the political landscape. And as I have thus described, there are so many reasons why, as soon as you look into these matters, as soon as you actually compare the allegations with the well-known facts and published realities of the organization, they are proven to be absolutely false. If you want to see more of what we do, if you want to see more of our dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of peaceful, lawful demonstrations, if you want to read our manifesto and see what actually motivates us, if you want to watch and listen to our interviews and find out what we actually believe, you can go to patriotfront.us and find out for yourself.